Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
What a crazy day. Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. This is episode 652 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And what a day it was to be a New York Jets fan, as it was a crazy trade deadline day today, as the New York Jets dealt Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, two key pieces to this franchise for a couple of years now. For Sauce, obviously, in year number 4, and Quinnen Williams in his 7th season with the team now gets dealt, and the New York Jets get a massive haul in return. Full of draft picks, couple players as well involved. We'll dive into it all today here on the podcast. But just from a range of emotions perspective, today was one of the crazier days as a New York Jet fan. And that is saying something, because there truly is never a dull moment with this team. Just when you think things can't happen, or they can't pop up in the headlines, or the Jets can't do something to get them to be talked about, right? We talk about that a lot, about this being a never a dull moment with this franchise. Today tops most days with this team. Tops really all the days that I can remember in terms of crazy days that have happened with this franchise. The simple way to put today and the simple way to process today was, number one, it was one of the craziest days in franchise history. And to put it simply, it will go down in a couple of years from now. We won't know right now, but in a couple of years from now, today will either go down as one of the greatest days in Jets franchise history or one of the worst days in Jets franchise history. Because what happens with Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams as they go to their new destinations, for Sauce with the Colts and for Quinnen Williams with the Dallas Cowboys, and what ultimately happens with these 5 first-round picks that the New York Jets received, more importantly, 9 draft picks total on days 1 and 2 over the 2026 and 2027 draft classes for the New York Jets. What happens with those picks will dictate how this day is viewed in franchise history. If the New York Jets swing and miss at quarterback in the 2026 draft and don't find talent for that said quarterback, and still have roster holes in a couple of years from now, and Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn are fired and they whiff on these picks, and we're sitting here 3 years from now having to restart all over again, then today goes down as one of the worst days in franchise history. But the flip side is, you find your franchise quarterback with one of these draft picks, you hit on at least a good amount of the rest. You're not going to hit and nail all 9, but over half, hit a significant amount of them. More importantly, get a couple stars over the next 2 years to replace the 2-star players that you just got rid of, mind you. Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams aren't just rotational pieces. They were cornerstone pieces to this franchise. Sauce Gardner just got paid as the highest cornerback in the NFL a couple months ago. His contract wasn't even set to kick in until 2027, because this year still playing on his rookie deal, and then he has the 5th-year option next season. Essentially, Sauce's contract was going to kick in during the 2027 season. Quinnen Williams has been here since 2019. By the way, no remaining McCagnon draft picks now on this team. Quinnen was the last one. But through all of the losing, through all of the lows, has remained as one of the best interior defensive linemen in football. So you better hit on these draft picks. That's my first overall thought. And that's kind of just the way I feel, to be honest. And maybe it's because I've had such a tough time gathering thoughts because today's just been such a crazy day. And I'm maybe more taking the approach of it's kind of just a wait and see game, right? We're going to either look back on this in 2 years from now and view this as a great day. We're going to look back on this and view this as a disastrous day, especially if Sauce and Quinnen have success elsewhere and the Jets are left with no talent. Glenn and Moochie are out and we're back to square one. And at that point, it's probably 17 years, no playoffs, and you're really in a dark hole. But I'm not going to sit here right now, really. And again, maybe it's just the state of shock, the state of surprise. I'll say this. I'm not, and we'll dive into all the trades, but I'm not stunned about the Quinnen Williams trade. I'm not shocked. I'm not stunned. Anytime, and I've always said this in sports, anytime a star player from your team, a well-liked player from your team, a player that is in his 7th year with your team, former first-round pick, we all know what Quinnen Williams brings to the table, right? Anytime a player of Quinnen Williams' caliber gets traded, even if you kind of felt it was coming, even if the writing was on the wall, we now get the reports that he requested a trade 3 different times this season. This even goes all the way back to when Glenn made the decision to move on from Rodgers, or I should say Glenn and Moochie, and he tweeted out another rebuild, ended up deleting the tweet, and you kind of knew right then and there was some frustration. And as time's gone on, frustration has continued to build. The relationship between him and this regime wasn't great, so you move on. I think the timing of Quinnen might be just a little bit surprising that we all kind of got the feeling that this was going to be something that happened in the offseason, maybe not necessarily during the year. But when you trade Sauce Gardner, when you have a fire sale like this, you make the move now. So the Quinnen thing isn't really that surprising. The writing was on the wall. You kind of felt it was coming. And let's be honest, through all the losing that Quinnen Williams has been through, you're kind of surprised a trade hasn't happened more recently, where he has completely just requested his way out and forced his way out. But you give him, he does deserve some respect from that aspect for keeping it under the radar and not making a big deal about it, because there was clearly frustration, but he still went out there, he still played, and that actually benefited the Jets to get more value. Because if he would have requested a trade and made this whole thing public, it would have been tougher for the Jets to get as much as they got for Quinnen Williams. The Quinnen Williams deal is really, really solid. It's the Sauce deal that I think gets a lot of people just stunned. I was stunned. And to be honest, when I saw the Adam Schefter report and the Ian Rappaport report, I really thought it was those fake accounts on Twitter. I really did. I was stunned by the Sauce Gardner move. Stunned. Completely shocked. I did not know really how to feel when I saw it. Right? The Quinnen move, when I saw it and saw the picks that they got in return, you understood it, and you actually like that type of move. And it's a move that was going to happen either now or in the offseason, so you get it now. But the Sauce move, just shocking. This was a player who you just signed back in July. You viewed him as a part of the solution long term. Right? We talk about him and Garrett Wilson, the next 6 years, those two guys being a part of this team. And now we sit here on Tuesday, November 4th, 8 games with this regime, little less for Sauce because he's missed 2 games with injury. So 7 games for him, he's gone. Just crazy. And here's what I'll say about Sauce. I'll start with this deal. And I get this notion from Jets fans all along about how you look at the side of not liking the Sauce deal or the Quinnen deal, but I don't see many Jet fans not liking the Quinnen deal. More so the Sauce deal. The fact that Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, for everything that they've done with this team, getting traded in the same day, I think is just crazy, and is just wild day. But the Sauce deal, and I understand this, both sides of it, where you get the one side of you're probably not going to, what are the chances you get a player like Sauce Gardner, that caliber, that type of impact? Let me remind you that Sauce is a two-time first-team All-Pro, two-time Pro Bowl. He was the Rookie of the Year back in 2022. We all know what Sauce has been able to do. You get the 2026 first, you get the 2027 first, you get A.D. Mitchell. So you get 2 firsts and a receiver. Mitchell drafted last year in the second round. We'll get to him more here in a little bit. We'll get to what the Jets actually got back in these deals a little bit later on. We'll spend more time on those guys too in later episodes. Today is more about just moving on from Quinnen, moving on from Sauce and the actual draft compensation. But I get the one side of, Sauce is, what are the chances you get a player that caliber with one of these draft picks? I also understand the side of, as much as he's been good and you look at a lot of the advanced metrics, he's been really good. He's elite in a lot of the advanced metrics. This is a guy that's got 3 interceptions in 55 games. You watch him play and he doesn't just dominate games. He doesn't take over games. He doesn't have that same impact that I think a lot of Jet fans saw out of Revis or other elite cornerbacks over the years. And just the idea of getting 2 first-round picks for a player who clearly this regime felt doesn't fit their mold. And when you have a rookie cornerback in A.Z. Thomas, who, let's not sit here and say he's Sauce Gardner or an elite corner, but a guy that has stepped in the couple of starts that he's made so far, the couple of appearances that he's made, has looked good. Quietly, Brandon Stevens has come along as a nice piece for this team after an awful start. Really now over the last 2 months, or not 2 months, I should say month and a half, it was the first 3 to 4 games were rough. I would say the month of September, but now he put together a really good month of October. You look forward to what he can do the rest of the way. And then you throw Jarvis Brownlee Jr. in the mix, who you trade for. You can understand, okay, this cornerback room can take a loss like this. This cornerback room can take a trade like this. And you get 2 first-round picks. And the way the contract is structured is where the Jets actually aren't eating a great amount of it. The way it was structured, Muji and Glenn kind of structured it as if a trade was possible, or if something went wrong in the early part of the contract, you could move on without it affecting you that much. And that's what happens. But just the whole idea of him being extended back in July is just what's crazy. And that's why I'm being completely honest. I can't sit here today and say, I 1,000% love these moves. I also can't sit here and say I 1,000% hate these moves. I'm kind of in the middle. This might be the easy way out, but we need to see what these draft picks are. And that will ultimately determine all of this. Because let's be honest, Jet fans, we've seen this before. You load up on draft picks. I mean, a little bit different, but the Jamal Adams trade, right? You get 2 first-round picks. They blew that up. Expansion roster. That's all we heard in the early parts of the Saleh Douglas regime. Started to build up talent, and here we are. Now we're tearing it all back down again. This is a regime, they've got to prove it. And do you have a ton of faith in Glenn and Muji to make the right picks? I'll say this about Muji. The moves that he's made, the small moves that he has made so far, he has had success. So you do have to give him the benefit of the doubt in that area. But the drafts, ultimately, it's going to come down to the quarterback. And obviously how they support that quarterback and all these other picks. But just stunned by the Sauce move. Stunned. And I'll say this about Sauce. This defense wasn't good this year with him. Is it going to be a little worse without him? Sure. But that there is that side of it too, that this Jets defense wasn't a top 5 defense. As a matter of fact, they've progressively gotten worse the last year and this year. And Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams have been a part of this defense. So it's a bad defense with Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. What's it going to be? Probably a bad defense without him. So really, what are you losing in that aspect? I could definitely understand that part of it. But all in all, you get 2 first-round picks this year and next year. And now it's all aboard the Daniel Jones hate watch, because you've got to hope that he returns to Giants Daniel Jones. So the Jets draft pick is higher, and you're looking at 2 earlier picks. We know the Jets pick will be high, but from an Indy perspective, hoping their pick is a little bit higher. One more thing, too, about Sauce. Not just the draft picks, but if A.Z. Thomas turns out to be a really good corner, this is a move that then looks to be genius. It does. My overall thoughts on the Sauce move is stunned. It's stunned. Just shocked. but understand why they did it. Understand what the thought process was and why you make this move. And I'll say this about Sauce, and I'll say this to a Quinnen here. Best of luck to Sauce. You wish him nothing but the best. Really good Jet. I mean, he was great with the fans. Was a part of that historic 2022 draft class with him and Garrett, Rookie of the Year. One of the better draft classes, even with this trade. You still look back at the talent that the Jets got. One of the better draft classes we've seen in Jets franchise history. Even though very well we could look at this draft class in 2022 next year, and maybe Garrett's the only one left. Jermaine didn't get traded, but there's a good chance Breece is out at the end of next season, especially if he wants out, and the craziness around Breece on Twitter today. But Sauce was awesome here. You wish him nothing but the best. And as his brother, who's his agent, said, it's a business. Jets view this. You see 2 first-round picks on the table. Tough to pass that up. You understand why they did it. Now you've got to hit on those picks, and now it's time for AZ Thomas to really step up, and you might have something in this cornerback room. And you also have to give Glenn here a little bit, too, the benefit of the doubt from a cornerback perspective, to hope that he understands what he wants these teams' cornerbacks to be and his ability to find them. Because quietly, Brandon Stephens has put together a good season and has quietly improved in the areas that he was struggling with. You see what the Jets have been able to do with Jarvis Brownlee, and AZ Thomas looks good. So you do have to have faith in Glenn as a former player. Clearly didn't see it in Sauce. Clearly didn't see what he wanted out of this cornerback room in Sauce. So you make that move. You get 2 firsts for it. Now, in terms of the Quinnen move, or one more thing on the Sauce move, they do get A.D. Mitchell. We'll have him under team control for the next 2 seasons, this year and then the next 2 years, as he's only in year number 2. Young, 23 years old, 6'2", 205 pounds, was a draft 2024 pick last year, second round, 52nd overall. Weird A.D. Mitchell Jets connection. If you go back to the video of the Jets war room last year, or 2 years ago now, 2024 draft, when Douglas and Saleh were banging the table to try and get Malachi Corley. When the Colts drafted A.D. Mitchell, Douglas and Saleh, more so Douglas, was very happy that A.D. Mitchell went off the board, meaning Malachi Corley could drop. Here we are, fast forward about a year and a half later, Corley's no longer with the Jets, and A.D. Mitchell is now traded to the Jets. Different regime, but funny, I've seen that clip surface today. In the long run, he does end up becoming a Jet, even though the previous general manager clearly wanted no part of him. In his career so far, very limited. And so far, when you look at what he's done, a little disappointing. But only in year 2, and you look at the way this Jets receiving room is structured, I said it's similar to John Mechie. He's going to get a very big opportunity over the next 9 games, and even going into next year, because he's under contract, to carve out a role for himself. You hope that the Jets can get something out of him where he can be a long-term piece to this wide receiver room. Same goes for John Mechie, because they desperately need it. Desperately need help. And he's going to get a lot of opportunities the rest of the way, because of the way the wide receiver room is. Josh Reynolds on IR. The fact that Allen Lazard survived the trade deadline. The fact that Allen Lazard is a Jet today and Sauce Gardner isn't is just crazy to think about. But that's where things stand with A.D. Mitchell. 25 games played, 32 receptions, 71 targets, 464 yards, 14.5 yards per reception in his career. He's had a tough time getting on the field and seeing opportunities with the Colts, just because the way their receiver room has gone. Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, they have all overtaken him. So he was essentially the team's wide receiver 4. But for the rest of the way this season, with how bad the Jets receivers are, minus Garrett Wilson, he's going to get a chance to be the number 2, number 3. It's really going to be the John Mechie, A.D. Mitchell show the rest of the way behind Garrett Wilson, as it should be. See what you have in those guys. 2 young players still. So that's the Sauce trade. You get a player, 2 first-round picks. You understand the move. You wish Sauce nothing but the best. Was great with the fans. Just crazy that a couple months ago we were talking about him being a long-term piece. Fast forward, and the ultimate example of life come at you fast in the NFL. Now, in terms of the Quinnen trade, I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, so we'll talk more about what they actually received in this deal. We can kind of see this coming. The writing was on the wall. We get the Connor Hughes report that he was requested a trade 3 times over the last, 7 months or so, dating back to February when he sent the tweet out about Aaron Rodgers, all the way to now here as we sit shortly after, or I should say a little while after the trade deadline, late on Tuesday night. He wanted out, and you can understand why, because he's been a part of a team for 7 years that has been straight losing. You go by what Quinnen Williams has sat through in his Jet career since being taken 3rd overall in 2019. 7-9, 2-14, 4-13, 7-10, 7-10, 5-12, 1-7. Now he goes to a Dallas team that, unlike Sauce, where the Colts are the number 1 seed, Quinnen does go to a Dallas team that is struggling and has their own issues. But the losing's been rough for Quinnen Williams. He has sat through all of this losing and has been a pro through it, has said nothing but the right things. Another guy you wish nothing but the best moving forward. Was a really, really good Jet. Another guy that was really awesome with the fans, good player, a good piece on this team during a really down time in Jets football. Quinnen Williams was a lone bright spot throughout all these seasons. His 2022 season, that's always a season that all Jet fans will always remember as the Big 12 sack campaign. Goes out there, dominates. That was really the only success that he saw, was the 6-3 and then 7-4 start in 2022, which then fizzled into a 7-10 season. And what's even crazier about Quinnen Williams is, in terms of actual winning percentage, the best year that he had as a Jet, just to show you what he's gone through, was 7-9. And that was his first season, because the 7-9 season with Gaze, where they started 1-7 and then went 6-2 the rest of the way, is a better win percentage than an extra loss in the 7-10, 17 game seasons that they had in 2022 and 2023. So this was a guy that just went through so much losing, but through it all, continued to play at a high level. And at some point, you had the feeling he was going to grow frustrated. He did grow frustrated in halfway through his 7th season. But 6.5 years of Quinnen Williams, 6.5 really, really good seasons, and another player that you wish nothing but the best moving forward. But when you look at the return, to get a first for him is really, really impressive. And also to add on top a second, I think a lot of people viewed Quinnen Williams and said you might be able to get a first and maybe a player, but to get a first and a second and a player, excellent, excellent value for Quinnen Williams. And this is a trade that I really actually have I like it. I do. It's a trade that if you're going to tear it down, and once you traded Sauce and you have a player that doesn't want to be here, to get this value, all things considered, you like it from that context. You also get Mazi Smith, who was the worst rated defensive tackle per PFF, has been a healthy scratch a handful of times. You're not going to look back on this trade and look at it from a Mazi Smith perspective. Even A.D. Mitchell could stink with the Jets. You're ultimately going to look back on these trades and look at them through the lens of, what did you get out of these 3 first-round picks? And what did you get out of all 5 of these first-round picks, including what the Jets already have this year and next year? They're 2 first-round picks that they already own. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to. If you get something out of A.D. Mitchell, if you get something out of Mazi Smith, that's a nice bonus. But ultimately, you've got to build this thing through the draft. You've got to hit on your draft picks. So that's the Quinnen side of things. Tired of losing. I just thought the timing, this would maybe be something more so that happened in the offseason, but trade deadline day, you already move on from Sauce. You're completely tearing it down. Cowboys have a need there. You get it done. Totally understand it from the Quinnen side of things. Just upsetting that he can never win here, because he was such a good Jet, a player that deserved to win, a player that you wish could saw some winning here, you wish that he could have seen this through, and just never did. So that's the Quinnen trade. Now, here's a list of all the future Jets draft picks. And I put this together in a Google spreadsheet actually a little bit earlier today. I want to throw it up on the screen here. So color-coded and all here for the YouTube audience. For the podcast audience, we'll read it off. 2026, Jets have first round pick, second round pick. So 4 picks in 2026 inside the first 2 rounds. When you look at 2027, they have 3 firsts, their own, the Colts, and the Cowboys. And then they have a second round pick that's their own and a third round pick that's their own. So all in all, and I mentioned this a bit earlier, but wanted to throw that up on the screen also to show really how things line up here. All in all for the Jets, 9 picks over the next 2 drafts in day number 1 and day number 2. 5 picks in the first round, 2 of those this year, 3 of those next season in 2027. So they get a haul. And as I said in the beginning, and I start to wrap this up. By the way, one other move that the Jets actually made today that I will notice, they added Jasir Taylor, cornerback from the Chargers. They give up a conditional 2028 7th-round pick. So in general, when you look at the Jets' entire haul, they get a 2026 first, a 2026 second, 2 firsts in 2027, a 2027 sixth. Going back to the Philly trade, John Mechie, A.D. Mitchell, Mozzie Smith. That's what the Jets received. And they gave up Sauce, Quinnen, the 2028 conditional 7th, Michael Carter, and a 2027 7th. So those were what the Jets got, what they gave up. They also got, of course, Jasir Taylor. Not that that's the headline move, but one other trade there. So that's the full Jets deadline haul. Really, I went into today, and that's why I had such a tough time forming thoughts today, because I really went into today expecting, okay, maybe Breece gets traded, but that was not going to be a surprise. Maybe, you look at maybe they get something for Lazard. Does he go to Pittsburgh? Maybe can you get a bag of chips for Michael Clemens? After the Michael Carter trade, you kind of thought that the Jets would make more so trades within their depth of their roster, just kind of shaving off some of the just dead pieces on this team that don't need to be here, the dead weight, if you will, whether that's Lazard, some of those other guys, as opposed to making 2 blockbuster trades. I mean, the Sauce Gardner trade is as big of a blockbuster as the Micah Parsons trade, and in some aspects is even bigger of a blockbuster and bigger of a shock, because the Micah Parsons trade you saw coming. Requested the trade. There was a standoff with Jerry Jones. This was, even though some fans floated it out there was no actual reports about the Jets shopping. There was reports about Quinnen. There was reports about Jermaine Johnson. There was reports about Breece. There was nothing about Sauce. This was completely, and his brother, who's also his agent, Alante Gardner, actually spoke to Rich Cimini and said that they had no clue this was happening until they received the call about 12:15 today. So this was something, too, that was pretty, it seems like a little late developing, if you will. But when you get 2 first-round picks for the path that the Jets are going on, it's tough to pass up from that standpoint. But ultimately, what all this will come down to is what the Jets get in these picks. And you've got to hope that Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn can hit on these picks. You've got to hope that they hit on the quarterback or whatever. Find a way to get a quarterback with these picks, because I'm sure there is people out there that might think they go the veteran route. That's more of a discussion in the offseason, whoever's available, all that stuff. But you've got to find a quarterback. You've got to find elite talent. You've got to hit on these draft picks. If you don't hit on these draft picks, this goes down as one of the worst days in franchise history. If you hit on these picks, this day could go down really. And this isn't me put on green goggles. All seriousness, if the Jets hit on these draft picks and build this thing through the draft and find their franchise quarterback and build around him the right way and get the necessary pieces in the building to turn this thing around, this could go down as one of the greatest days in franchise history if this thing turns into finding talent that turns this organization into a sustainable winner. That's the one side of it. But the other side is we're here in 3 years from now They're still losing. We're on a new regime. These picks stink. The quarterback stinks, and we're back to square one. And I think a lot of Jet fans, myself included, there is that cynical Jet fan inside of you that's like, probably the latter is going to happen because we've seen it time and time again now. And it just stinks because whether it was Darnold, Jamal Adams trade, now Sauce, you just wish one of these days, even Quinnen, that they don't have to trade the first-round picks to try and then get more first-round picks so then they can try and hit on those first-round picks. Like, it's just been a constant cycle of garbage. You draft the first-round pick. Some of them work, some of them don't. In this case, Quinnen and Sauce were hits, but the team's not good enough. New regime, players frustrated. You then trade those players for those first-round picks. Now you have to hope that these first-round picks pan out. It's just a constant cycle, and it's got to just have hope that Muji and Glenn can hit on these picks and get this right. This also guarantees, by the way, that Muji and Glenn are back next season and back probably the year after that. They could win one game all year. They could lose their next 9 games, look like trash. And as bad as the defense has been, let's be honest, it's going to get a bit worse without Quinnen and Sauce. And it was already bad, so I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, they took a top 10 defense and tore it down. No. They took a bad defense and made it worse, but that doesn't matter. They're 1-7. This season's a wash. What happens this year, my point is meaningless. They can go 1-16. Glenn and Muji are coming back. Because these moves today show you that they got insurance that they're going to be here long term. If there was a real possibility of them being a one and done, they wouldn't have made these moves today. But making these moves today tells you they're automatically getting next year, and they're probably getting the year after that. This guarantees them 2 seasons to try and see this through. Because next year, you're going to have the rookie quarterback. You're going to have that built-in excuse of it's year 1 with a rookie quarterback. And you're also going to have, we have 3 first-round picks that we accumulated for next year's draft in 2027, which, by the way, the early signs of the 2027 draft is it could be historically good. So they're going to get next year, and then they're going to get the year after that. And if in 2027 they still stink and they win 4 games next year and they win 3 games in 2027, then you're back to square one. But to the fans out there that thought this could be a one and done or were hoping for a one and done, today gave you insurance that Glenn and Muji are here for the long haul. They're not going anywhere. And you have to hope that they get it right. Because if they don't, we're back to square one. And by the way, with the Sauce or with the Breece and Jermaine side of things, Jermaine, awesome Jet. He should get an extension. One of this tweet that he sent out after talking to the team and them telling him, you know, we're going to keep you. And then today, listening on offers, and not saying that they were ever going to trade him, but for him to still want to be here after all of this, seeing all these players go and still wanting to be here to see it through. Forget about what he is off the field. Awesome Jet on the field. Awesome player on the field. And you could really make a case that Jermaine Johnson's more impactful than Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. And one of the ways to tell how impactful a player is how the team fares in their absence. The difference in the Jets defense when Jermaine Johnson's on the field compared to when he's off is drastic. And I don't think it's any shocker or any coincidence that since Jermaine's been back from injury, they've started to play better. Yeah, they gave up a good amount against Cincy, but the 2 games prior to that, they held them 13 points against Denver and 13 against Carolina. I don't think that's any coincidence with Jermaine back. His ability against the pass, his ability against the run. So happy he stays. The Breece thing is very strange because you get the whole Kurt Benkert DM drama where Breece basically DM. Well, first of all, it was the Breece with the sad emoji. And you didn't know if that was because he was sad about the players who left or if he was sad that the Jets weren't trading him or vice versa. He was sad that the Jets were going. Like, you didn't understand that. He then deletes that. And then you get a DM post from Kurt Benkert screenshotting that Breece wants to be traded. And you also get a Jordan Schultz report that says Breece wants out. I understand keeping Breece, but there is the side of things that if Brees does want out, why didn't you trade him then? Once you traded Sauce and Quinnen, if Brees really wants out and doesn't want to be here, you should have followed through with a Brees trade. I don't care if the Chiefs were only willing to give you a 4th-round pick. That's better value, and you wanted a 3rd. That's better value than what you're going to get now in the offseason, because I think we're heading towards Brees Hall walking this offseason. And the Jets could put the tag on him. He'll probably request a trade. You'll go down that whole rabbit hole. Usually the team ends up winning those things, but it could get messy. And if he leaves for nothing, it's a huge mistake, because you take a 4th-round pick any day of the week over Brees just leaving for absolutely nothing. So that's a situation to keep an eye on the rest of the way, and more specifically, in the offseason. What happens with Brees now the rest of the season, and what happens with him in the offseason? Because if you just let him walk, then not making that trade today is stupid. And if he really wants out, then not making that trade today is especially stupid. But if you tag him and you extend him and he wants to be here, then you understand it. But I just don't think that's the case. So one player that I would have actually been okay with them trading, if it is true, would have been Brees. Totally, would have been hoping for it once these trades went down, once I see the reports, was Brees, because if he doesn't want to be here, get rid of him. You're going to probably lose him anyway for nothing in free agency. But 5 first-round picks for the New York Jets. 3 of them accumulated today. Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner gone. Crazy. If you would have told any Jet fan a couple months ago that Sauce would have been traded, I think they would have all thought you were crazy. And you would have told any Jet fan that Quinnen Williams was going to be traded, in 2 years after signing that extension before the 2023 season, I think a lot of people would have thought you were crazy too. That was also at the height of the Rodgers summer mania in 2023, Hard Knocks. It looked like this team was headed in the right direction, and it's all come crashing back down. And now it's on Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji to use these picks and build this thing up. 2 things can be true. I'll leave you with this. The Jets got rid of 2 really good football players today. But they also can be better long-term without these 2 very good football players if they hit on the draft picks. I think that's a common notion that needs to be more so around how you view these trades. You could admit that the Jets lost 2 really good football players. Let's not trash Sauce and Quinnen just because they're traded. Let's tell it like it is. They're 2 really good football players. But you can also say, I'm trading these players any day of the week. When you get 3 first-round picks for them, you now have 5 first-round picks in the next 2 years. Yeah, you lost 2 great football players, but it also could be true that you're now better set up for the future. And that's how I view this deadline. And that's, I think, kind of where some are at as well. So that'll do it. Another episode in the books. We'll have more deadline fallout over the next couple of days. Also discuss a little bit in terms of what the Jets got back with some of these players. Dive into a little bit more with them. Like I said, today's episode more centric on just Quinnen and Sauce and the picks, but we'll dive into also the players that the Jets got back in return. Glenn will speak to the media tomorrow. Muji met to the media today, so I'll comb through some of those quotes and potentially have a pod up tomorrow as well. And what's crazy about all this is the Jets play a football game in a couple of days against the Cleveland Browns. So still got 9 games left to go. So lots of craziness still to come here with the New York Jets. Appreciate you all as always. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.